The Mavericks pulled off a Game 4 win, so we're heading back to Boston. I'm Devin, and you're watching Hoops and Hops on Buffet Sports.
Uh, yeah. Okay, good morning, afternoon, and evening. It's the guy you should believe in. Dropping heat like every season. Underdog like Willie Beeman. Classic like Dom singing. Blasting like bombs ringing.
Let's get into it. um, Dallas was able to pull off a Game 4 win. Luka played better defense in the first quarter, but there was more obviously that impacted the game. Clearly, the Mavs had a fantastic offensive game, and the Celtics had a piss poor offensive game. The Mavs have got to take this one game at a time if they do want to stretch this series out and turn it into a more competitive series as a whole. But it is more than possible. So let's get into the specifics of Game 4 because pretty much the first half. That's really what we need to talk about here. Um, JJ Redick said something interesting recently that obviously the last 2 minutes of every quarter, we kind of assume that's where games are won and lost. But in a lot of cases, the first 2 minutes of quarters are where a lot of games are won and lost. And so I thought that was interesting. And so I tracked at least the first quarter, the first 2 minutes to see what it looked like. It obviously didn't matter after that point, but the Dallas actually lost the first 2 minutes. Clearly didn't matter in this game, but um, I just thought that was interesting. I'm looking forward to paying attention to it in game 5 and maybe once the series ends, looking back through the series and looking at the first 2 minutes of every quarter and seeing who won and lost, specifically in the first and the fourth, to see if there's, see what kind of validity is there. Probably the third. I think the second quarter is probably the most just coasting quarter in basketball. That's an interesting question. Leave it down in the comments if you agree with me. Is the second quarter of a basketball game the quarter in which teams coast the most? Let's get into the first quarter here. Derek Lively, about 6 minutes left on the clock in the first quarter, hit his first three of the playoffs. JJ Redick says the first three of his career. I don't know if there's any merit to it, but he had a really fantastic sequence where it was a 3-pointer block and then a dunk. And the Mavs were up 11 at that point. It felt though like the Celtics were doing what they've done throughout the playoffs. They did this against the Pacers where it felt like they were just kind of coasting, waiting for whatever team they're playing's run to end, and then they would just take over the game. And it kind of felt that way. And they've done that against the Mavericks at certain points throughout the series. Ultimately, it didn't work out for them. They coasted a little too long. But interesting, to say the least. They certainly came out flat in the first quarter. Um, Luka had 13 points in the first quarter. Much better defense, obviously, and he played like there was no whining to the refs. If there was, it was very minimal. It might have been like a look or something, and then moving on. So that was encouraging to see. Certainly, the fouls were going in the Mavs' way in the first quarter. The extender, oh goodness, I just saw something about him. I'll put him in the video right here if I can think of his name. Scott Foster. Scott Foster. I'll put a picture up here of Scott Foster, the extender. When Adam Silver needs a series to go at least a game longer, he brings in Scott. So I'll be interested to see who's going to be part of the officiating crew in game 5. If we're getting Scott Foster again. If so, then we might see a game 6. But fouls were certainly going in the way of the Mavs in the first quarter, and the old adage, you got to win by 20 in a closeout game to win by 3. So a couple more notes here. It seems like Tatum is just, when he has the ball, he just dribbles too much. He dribbles the air out of the ball. It reminds me a lot, obviously in a very different way. Back isn't to the basket. He's facing the basket. But it's similar to, like, if you remember Melo's years with both OKC and Portland, when he would get the ball, it just felt like the air got taken out of the stadium and of the team. And it was just like, oh gosh, like I'm going to take 6 dribbles here and just kill all the pace, momentum, and ball movement that we have going on here. I get the same feeling from Tatum that the entire team just kind of puts their hands on their sides and just waits. Oh my gosh, earthquake. I just shook my entire desk. Puts their hands on their sides and just kind of is like waits for Tatum to do his thing. Like, okay, we got to let the kid do his thing, whatever. Um, there's a lot of east west movement with Tatum, not a lot of north south. He finished a layup that was difficult in the first quarter, and Doris made a point about it, and I thought it was a smart point that she's very correct. He's had a terrible time finishing throughout the playoffs, and just in general, we see it from Tatum quite often. Derek White hit that nuts three in the first quarters from like 30 plus feet. And then Kyrie immediately comes down and responds. 40 seconds left on the clock. PJ Washington hits another three, 30 seconds left on the clock. And then there was like 3 turnovers consecutively on out of bounds plays to end the first quarter. And the first quarter ended 21-34 in favor of the Mavs, up by 13. Entering the second quarter, I really like the energy that I believe it's Josh Green and Dante Exum bring to the floor when they are there. But when you look across finals teams, there, of course, are those energy bench guys, but they're still, in my mind at least, better than those two guys. But I certainly love the energy that they bring. Those two guys just don't feel like finals guys, like finals difference makers, but they made big plays in the beginning of the second to stave off the Celtics from making a run while Luka and Kyrie took a seat. Dante Exum went on a 5-0 personal run until there was a timeout, I believe it was, or a media timeout, where they reviewed his three and his foot was on the line, and so they took the three back. So it didn't end up being a 5-0 run. At that point, it was an 18-point lead. It got taken away, came back to a 15-point lead. And then Exum comes back and hits his three. So it extends. Jaylen Brown responds with that corner in the three, or that three in the corner, sorry. And I was kind of wondering, okay, is this where the Celtics sort of pop up? Are they going to make their run now? They did not. Exum has this, when he's on the floor, this really aggressive and frantic energy where it reminds me of Russell Westbrook in the MVP season. If you've seen the clip of him rebounding the ball like 4 times and kicking it out to different shooters at the end of a game to try and get a game winner because he knew he wasn't going to shoot the ball, but he's like, I can rebound it. That's how I feel watching Dante Exum when he's on the floor. It's frantic, it's aggressive, it's herky jerky. He's developed into a much better shooter than he was in Utah. And it's been a nice pace change for the Mavs. To that point, the Mavs were making a lot of quick, good decisions. And that was a huge difference in this game that I noticed. There was a lot more confidence. There wasn't as much hesitation. There wasn't a lot of, slow play. When they got in the half court, it was quick, quick, quick ball, move, move, move. Luka doing his thing. Everyone was clicking at a very high level. And I wonder how much of it was that they have played a much tougher playoffs, and obviously Luka played better defense, but also I wonder fatigue wise if they finally caught their breath. I don't know. It's also just hard to win a closeout game if you're the Celtics, especially when you're not at home. So not too much to talk about there. The Mavs were certainly controlling the offensive boards in the first half, which is been a huge piece to the puzzle for them, and part of the reason why they've just been getting slaughtered by the Celtics up until this point. Daniel Gafford was an animal in this game, and Derek Lively was too. I think he had something like 15 rebounds. Let me double check here. I want to say it was like 15 rebounds in this game. Derek Lively finished the game with 12 rebounds and 11 points, a double double. I think oh, yeah, they said something about that in the broadcast. He was like the fifth youngest player to record a double double in the finals. So huge. They controlled the boards uh, in a massive way. Daniel Gafford didn't have a ton of rebounds, but had a huge impact on the game defensively and was just such a force and a presence in the middle of the floor. Luka does this thing on the offensive end that, like Tatum dribbling the air out of the ball, it's the opposite, but it has the same effect. When Luka does those like snatch back threes, it's kind of like LeBron's look at the ball and shoot, but it's Luka's version where he just kind of snatches the ball back. When he does that, it sucks the energy out of the Mavs. It's such a high risk, high reward play because if he makes it, it sets the crowd on fire. It sets the team on fire. Generally, you see a timeout called after it because it's like, uh-oh, Luka's about to go on a run. But when he cranks it, it's just everyone on the court and in the stadium kind of just goes, ugh. and um and it kind of, I feel like it eats at his confidence. I don't think it really does, but it appears that way where it's just like, ah, dang it, like I didn't make that, and this was supposed to be my moment. um it just, the point is, it sucks a lot of energy out of the Mavs. Pause. Luka played very calm in the first half. He had 18 points. Like I said, 13 in the first quarter. Mavs lead by 20 going into the final 2 minutes of the game. Jaylen Brown picked up his third foul as well. They end the second quarter up 61-35. Luka had 25 ending the half. Kyrie had 11. Jason Tatum had 15, and Jaylen Brown had 8. So just for the Celtics in general, when you look at the box score, they didn't shoot well at all. Tatum was 4 for 10. Drew Holiday was 4 for 10. Derek White was 2 for 8. Jaylen Brown was 3 for 12. Peyton Pritchard was 5 for 14. Obviously, he got garbage minutes at the end of the game. We'll talk about that. But overall, just a terrible shooting night for the Celtics. And it was kind of, they weren't playing great. Like I talked about in the last video, they weren't playing tremendously to begin with. So it's not surprising to me that they're on the back end of their bell curve. If this continues, that's where the series gets very interesting. If they are on the back of their bell curve and they don't hit that spike soon, then it's going to get interesting very fast, especially if the Mavs claim game 5 and head back to Dallas. It starts to get spooky, but obviously it's a long and hard road to get there. We'll see what the shooting woes look like. Kristaps Porzingis is out. He's day to day. To me, that means we will play him in dire straits at the end of a game when we need a bucket, but otherwise he's not available. So going into the third quarter, this was pretty much the last relevant quarter because if they couldn't get it to a certain point going into the fourth or even towards the end of the third, then it was done. So to begin the third, Al Horford, Jason Tatum, and Jaylen Brown all had, I think it was 3 fouls, and they all picked up a foul in the first like 2 minutes. Daniel Gafford, this is where we had the Daniel Gafford moment in the beginning of the third. He was at the free throw line like twice, and he had a couple impact plays on both the offensive and defensive end, was rebounding the ball well. This was kind of the Daniel Gafford minutes. I think it was a stretch of like 3 minutes. Yeah, Daniel Gafford blocks Tatum, and then Tatum fouls him and picked up his fourth, right? Like right away. It was a Dallas Avalanche at this point, 9 minutes and 30 seconds left in the third. They were up by 32 at this point. Obviously, the Celtics, it's hard to win. Like I said, it's hard to win in a closeout game, especially when it's not on your home floor. This is where the sleepy seas start to show, and the desperate Mavs begin to could start their comeback, right? At this point, the Mavs are up 75-42. And I have here literally Celtics have 6 minutes to get this to 18, or it's done. It's over. And this was at about just over 8 minutes left in the third quarter. This is just something I observed. I've been observing about the playoffs. Outside of the Celtics, it feels like 3-point shooting has been down for the most part in comparison to previous years where the 3 ball has been so heavily utilized in the playoffs and the math. of the three ball. Outside of the Celtics, it feels like for a lot of teams, and maybe my memory is just deceiving me, but I feel like the three-pointer has not been used so much. We saw in this game Dallas dominated the paint, and that's what they've been doing they have been dominating the paint pretty much throughout the series, but obviously the Celtics are that exception to the rule that they are shooting the threes and they are making them. And the threes just more than a two. That's the simple math of it. Three is greater than two. But they didn't shoot well tonight. Dallas dominated the paint in the offensive boards and won the game. Derek Lively had a huge like back-to-back dunks in the third quarter. Mavs were leading by 36 at this point. And then Joe Mazzulla waves the white flag at about 2 minutes and 49 seconds. So I was just about right with my six. They have 6 minutes to cut this to 18, about 40 seconds off, 50 seconds off from that. But generally, coaches give a team, if they're down big, till about 2 minutes left in the third to cut it to a reasonable number, generally half of whatever the lead is going into the fourth. So in this case, I was a little generous to cut it to 18 going into the fourth with their ability to just get hot and shoot. 18 feels like a comfortable number for them to play the fourth quarter in its entirety. For other teams, it's 10. For other teams, it's 12. It just depends on who your personnel is. But generally, by 2 minutes in the third quarter is when we see coaches pull their guys and wave the white flag if it's not at a number that they feel comfortable playing their guys through the fourth quarter. After Kyrie and Luka sat down with a minute and 29 seconds, obviously at that point it's garbage time now. And JJ Redick brought up a good point, and it's been something that I think I've touched on once or twice, but maybe not given enough shine to, that I think is important in these series, is garbage time is not always lost time. Garbage time is are moments where players can catch something or coaches can see something that they think, I wonder if this action would work, and they can give guys runs. So it was one of the first times I haven't turned a game off where it's just a blowout, because you never know what you're going to see. Of course, Sam Hauser hits a couple threes here. It doesn't matter, but the third quarter ends with the Mavs up 92-60. So keeping that 32-point lead. In the fourth quarter, during garbage time, I was interested to see who we could see get a run on Monday, whether it's for the C's or for the Mavs. What we came out with was obviously Peyton Pritchard minutes. I love watching Peyton Pritchard. I talked about it. And he shot terribly anyways, but it's just fun to watch him go out and hoop. Tim Hardaway Jr., though, hit a couple threes in the fourth quarter. He was like 3 for 3 at one point, just going brazy. And the whole Mav Stadium was rocking because it was just the cherry on top. Are we going to see in game 5 some early run to heat check Tim Hardaway? Because he is a flamethrower. You get him going, and he could go for 30 or he could go for 2. There's no in between for Tim Hardaway. And 30 is an exaggeration. By 30, it's 15. But 15 feels like 30 when it comes from a guy you don't account for. And we haven't seen that a ton in these playoffs or the series like we have in previous years, which I find interesting. What the playoffs comes down to, in my mind, the playoffs is NBA in general is a star-driven league. But what the playoffs come down to generally is you're trying to cancel people out. So let's say generally for most teams, they have 2 stars. Those 2 stars cancel each other out. So what does it come down to? It comes down to your switchability on defense, your versatility on defense, and then the X factor. We talk about X factors a lot, or Alfreds, as JJ Redick calls them. The one guy that steps up in a game that the other team doesn't plan for, because they're 10 points, they're 5 rebounds, they're 6 assists, they're 4 steals, they're 3 blocks, they're random stat or defense that shows up in the box score, or what the defense doesn't always show up in the box score, but that one player who has an impact on the game in one way or another is the tide turner. because their 15 points, what I was going to say was their 15 points, their 5 rebounds, their 6 assists, their 3 steals, they feel like 30 points. They feel like 10 rebounds. They feel like 10 assists. When a player that you aren't expecting goes off in some way, as the opposing coach, you just kind of have to throw your hands up and say, they fucking got us. There's not much more than that. It's because again, you're just trying to cancel each other out. And then it's who's third, fourth, fifth guy is going to show up. And Tim Hardaway can be that guy in the correct scenario. So I'll be interested to see if Jason Kidd gives him some run early in game 5, maybe in that early second quarter, 4 minute stretch where no starters are really on the court and it's just sort of whoever has the lead, they're trying to maintain it and the other team's trying to make some sort of comeback. If the Mavs are down, I expect them to throw in Tim Hardaway. Well, if the Mavs are down, Luka and Kyrie are going to be playing. I expect Tim Hardaway to see the floor at some point during game 5, probably early on, to just get a heat check, get a read. Is he hot? Because if Tim Hardaway has 2 threes and a layup in the second quarter when the Celtics starters sit down and the Mavs are playing their guys 45 minutes, and then all of a sudden the Mavs 1 point lead turns into 10. And then when the Celtics get back out there, they have to play frantic, but they're sleepy and they have these shooting woes. And Jason Tatum starts moving east to west and forcing up, robotic 3-pointers. All of a sudden that starts cascading. I'm kind of rambling at this point, but you see what I'm saying here, the impact that the third, fourth, fifth guy can have on a game. Game ended 84-122. Do I think the Mavs can pull off this upset? No. Do I think the Mavs can push it to game 6? Possibly. Do I want them to? No, it kind of feels like a moot point. I think realistically, the Celtics take care of business on their home floor in game 5 and this thing. And like I said, Jaylen Brown gets his finals MVP. It's a little bit sweeter because it's at home. But is it possible after watching last night, and if Luka keeps his emotions in check, I think it's completely possible because Luka is a nuclear bomb waiting to go off at any moment. And so is Kyrie Irving. So there it is. Recap of game 4, some of my thoughts on it, and a preview for game 5. I'm Devin, and you're watching Hoops and Hops on Buffet Sports. If you want to see more of me, you can check out our YouTube channel. I do videos like this every week, as well as for the Broncos. If you want to see more of the rest of the channel, we talk about football a ton as well. I have a co-host. His name is Zane. He's pretty great too, I guess. But you can catch us on YouTube, TikTok, and Instagram at buffet.sports. We post every day, if not twice a day. We're doing some schedule changes, but nonetheless, comment. We do a comment show every Sunday. Leave your hate, leave your love, whatever you want. Ciao, guys.